could you do this to me in front of everyone? I trusted you, and you betrayed me.
You ever have one of those moments where the world just stops, like the universe hits the pause button, and you can actually hear the hum of the electricity in the walls? And you just know that whatever happens in the next 10 seconds is going to change the trajectory of your entire life. I had that moment on a Tuesday night in Chicago, standing on the 42nd floor of the Wildest Tower, holding a bottle of sparkling water that cost more than my sneakers, staring down the most powerful woman in the tech world. My name is Julian Thorne, and if you saw me back then, you wouldn't have looked twice. Nobody did. That was the point of the job. I was 33, a single dad with a hairline that was thinking about receding and a bank account that was constantly in the red. Working as a server at l'Apex, which is French for we charge you $50 for a salad the size of a golf ball. To the customers, I was just a uniform, a pair of floating hands that refilled wine glasses and disappeared, a shadow in a waistcoat. They didn't know that 5 years ago I was on track to be the youngest linguistics professor in the history of Northwestern University. They didn't know I spoke 5 languages fluently: English, Japanese, Mandarin, Spanish, and French, and they certainly didn't know that the only reason I was wiping crumbs off their table instead of lecturing in a hall was because my wife, Elena, got sick, and the American healthcare system chewed us up, swallowed our savings, and spit us out broke before she passed away. So there I was, drowning in grief and debt, raising my 7-year-old daughter, Maya, in a shoebox apartment in Pilsen where the radiator clanked like a dying engine, just trying to keep the lights on. Maya was the only bright spot. She had Alana's eyes, these big, curious pools of brown, and my stubbornness. And every morning before school we'd do our little ritual. I'd teach her a new word in a different language. That morning it was kibu, Japanese for hope, which felt ironic because hope was in short supply that week. Seeing as I had an eviction notice tucked into my back pocket that burned against my skin like a brand, the restaurant was buzzing that night. A specific kind of nervous energy because she was coming in. Kiyomi Sato, the CEO of Sato Dynamics, the Iron Lotus of the robotics world, a woman whose net worth had 2 commas and whose reputation for destroying her enemies was legendary. The staff was terrified. My manager, Gavin, a guy who sweated through his suits and treated the staff like cattle, was practically vibrating, grabbing me by the arm and hissing, "Julian, you're on the VIP table. Don't speak unless spoken. Don't make eye contact, and for the love of God, don't mess this up or you're done. You hear me?" I just nodded, fixing my tie, pushing down the exhaustion that lived in my bones, thinking about Maya's asthma medication, which was running low, thinking about the rent, thinking just survive the shift, get the tips, go home. At 8 p.m. sharp, the elevator doors slid open, and the air in the room changed. Literally, it got colder. Kiyomi Sato walked in like she owned the building, flanked by 3 suits who looked like they were carved out of granite, and she was. Intimidating isn't even the word. She was terrifyingly elegant, wearing a white suit that looked like it was tailored by lasers, her hair cut in a sharp bob that could cut glass. She sat at the corner table, the best view in the city, and didn't even look at the menu. Just started firing off orders in English to her assistants while ignoring the staff completely. I did my dance. The invisible ballet of service, pouring the vintage sake, placing the napkins, sliding the appetizers onto the table without making a sound. It was going fine, boring even, until the main course. I was bringing out the Wagyu beef, moving carefully, when a busboy, a new kid named Leo, tripped over a loose floorboard near the kitchen swing doors. He stumbled, his shoulder checked mine hard, and for a split second, gravity won. The bottle of Pellegrino in my left hand tilted, just a fraction, but it was enough. A splash. Maybe 2 tablespoons of water. It hit the tablecloth, not even on her, just near her elbow. A small dark spot on the pristine white linen. The room went silent. I mean, dead silent. Leo froze, I froze, and Kiyomi Sato slowly turned her head to look at the wet spot. Then she looked up at me. Her expression wasn't angry, which would have been easier. It was disgusted. A profound, bone-deep revulsion, like she was looking at a cockroach that had crawled onto her plate. She turned to her VP, a guy named Mr. Tanaka, and she switched to Japanese fast, sharp, and brutal, assuming the dumb waiter with the tired eyes wouldn't understand a syllable. "Look at him," she hissed, her voice low but carrying that distinct, high-class Kyoto dialect that drips with old money snobbery. This is why American service is a joke. They hire these bottom feeders. He has the eyes of a cow, completely empty. Probably goes home to a dirty apartment and watches television until he passes out. People like this, they have no discipline, no culture. It's genetic, really, a waste of space. Mr. Tanaka chuckled nervously. "Don't let it ruin your appetite, Sato-sama." "It's already ruined," she continued, wiping her sleeve even though the water hadn't touched her, purely theatrical. "Get him out of my sight before I have him fired. I don't want to smell his failure while I eat." I stood there, the bottle still in my hand, and I felt the heat rise up my neck, not embarrassment, but rage, a cold, hard rage that I hadn't felt since the insurance company denied Elena's last treatment. She didn't just insult me as a waiter. She insulted my existence, my struggle, the very survival I was fighting for every single day for my daughter. She called me a bottom feeder, a cow. She assumed I was stupid because I was serving her food. Gavin was rushing over, looking panicked, ready to drag me away and probably fire me in the kitchen to save face. And my brain did a quick calculation. If I stay silent, I keep the job for maybe another month until Gavin finds a reason to cut me. I keep my dignity by swallowing her poison. If I speak, I lose everything. I lose the rent money. I lose the security. But then I thought about Maya. I thought about the word kibu. I thought about Elena, who used to tell me, "Julian, your mind is a palace. Don't let anyone treat it like a shack." And so I didn't move. I didn't retreat. I straightened my back, adjusting my posture from the slump of a servant to the stance of a lecturer, and I looked Kiyomi Sato directly in the eyes. "With all due respect, Sato-sama," I said, and the Japanese rolled off my tongue like silk, perfect Kigo, honorifics, but with a razor-sharp edge. "The water did not touch your suit. And while I may be a server, my eyes are not empty, they are tired, because I work double shifts to raise a daughter who is already smarter than half the people in this room." The sound of silverware hitting a plate. Mr. Tanaka dropped his fork. The entire table froze. Sato's eyes went wide, the mask of boredom cracking for the first time. I wasn't done. I leaned in just a fraction, lowering my voice so only her table could hear, switching from standard Japanese to her specific regional dialect. "And for the record, madam, judging a man's worth by his uniform isn't a sign of culture. It is a sign of insecurity. A true leader inspires those below them. They do not crush them to feel taller. Enjoy the Wagyu. It's excellent tonight." I placed the water bottle down on the table with a soft click, turned around, and walked away. You could have heard a pin drop in that restaurant. The silence was heavy, thick, suffocating. I walked past Gavin, whose jaw was practically on the floor, past the kitchen staff who were staring at me like I had just grown wings, and I pushed through the swing doors. 5 seconds later, Gavin burst in, his face purple. "What the hell was that? Are you insane? Do you know who that is? You just committed suicide, Julian. You're done. Get out. Get your stuff and get out right now." "I'm going," I said, untying my apron. My hands were shaking now, the adrenaline dumping out of my system, leaving me weak. "Don't worry, Gavin. I'm going." I walked out the back door into the Chicago winter, the wind hitting me like a physical blow, slipping on the black ice in the alley. I had no job. I had $400 in the bank. Rent was $1,200 and due in 3 days. I sat in my beat-up Honda Civic, gripping the freezing steering wheel, and I just screamed. I screamed until my throat was raw, hitting the dashboard, cursing my pride, cursing my big mouth. Why didn't I just take it? Why did I have to be a hero? Heroes don't pay for asthma inhalers. I drove home in a daze, the city lights blurring into streaks of neon. When I got inside the apartment, Mrs. Hernandez, my neighbor who watched Maya, gave me a sad look. She knew the look of a man who'd lost a job and patted my arm before leaving. I went into Maya's room. She was asleep, clutching her stuffed rabbit, breathing with that slight wheeze that always terrified me. I sat on the floor next to her bed and cried. I'm not ashamed to say it. I wept because I was terrified. I had stood up for my dignity, sure, but dignity doesn't buy groceries. I felt like I had failed Elena, failed Maya, failed everything. The next morning was a blur of panic. I was circling ads in the paper, calling temp agencies, trying to sell my plasma, anything. Around 10 a.m., there was a knock on the door. Not a neighbor, not too authoritative. I froze. Eviction notice already? Police? I opened the door, and standing there was a man in a black suit wearing an earpiece. Behind him, in the cracked driveway of my apartment complex, sat a black Maybach that looked like a spaceship landed in the ghetto. Mr. Julian Thorne? The suit asked. Yeah, I said, wiping my hands on my jeans. Ms. Sato requests your presence, immediately. My stomach dropped. Requests or demands? Is she suing me? Look, I don't have money for a lawyer. Tell her I'm sorry about the... She is not suing you, Mr. Thorne. She wants to talk. Please, the car is waiting. I looked back at Maya, who was eating cereal and watching cartoons. I couldn't leave her. I have my daughter. Bring her, the suit said, his face impassive. There is a booster seat in the back. A booster seat. In a Maybach. This woman did her homework. I got Maya dressed, told her we were going on a secret mission, and we got in the car. The leather was soft as butter. Maya's eyes were wide as saucers, asking if this was Batman's car. I held her hand tight, terrified of what was coming. We drove downtown, not to the restaurant, but to the Sato Dynamic skyscraper. We were ushered up to the penthouse office, a glass box in the sky. Kiyomi Sato was standing by the window, looking out at the gray lake. She turned when we entered. No assistants. No bodyguards. Just her. She looked smaller without her entourage, less like a deity and more like a human being. Mr. Thorne, she said, her voice neutral. And this must be Maya. Maya hid behind my leg. Hi, she squeaked. There are coloring books and markers on them. Coffee table over there, Sato said, gesturing to a corner of the massive office. And hot chocolate, please. Maya looked at me, I nodded, and she scampered off. I stood there, crossing my arms, waiting for the axe to fall. I looked into you, Julian, Sato said, picking up a tablet. Former prodigy, full scholarship to Northwestern. Published in 3 linguistic journals before you were 25. Then, a gap, your wife. Don't talk about my wife, I said. My voice sharp. I won't, she said, putting the tablet down. I'm not here to dig up your pain. I'm here because I made a mistake last night. And I don't make mistakes often. She walked around the desk, leaning against the edge of it. You were right. About the insecurity. I grew up in a boardroom full of men who thought I was a decoration. I learned to bite before I was bitten. I learned to crush anyone who looked weak because I was terrified of being seen as weak myself. When I saw you, I saw a man doing a menial job, and I projected my own fears onto you. I assumed you were less, and you proved me wrong in 3 dialects. I stayed silent. An apology from a billionaire is nice, but it doesn't pay rent. I need a head of global communications, she said, dropping the bomb like it was nothing. My company is expanding into South America and Francophone Africa next quarter. My current team is adequate, but they lack nuance. They translate words, not meanings. You understood the cultural subtext of my insult last night better than my own VP. You code switched instantly. That is a rare gift. You want to hire me? I asked, incredulous. I embarrassed you in public. You challenged me, she corrected. I need people who can challenge me. I'm surrounded by yes men like Mr. Tanaka who laugh when I make cruel jokes. It's boring, and it's dangerous for business. She slid a piece of paper across the desk. Contract. Starting salary $150,000. Full benefits. Stock options. I looked at the number. It was life-changing. It was safety. It was Maya's asthma. Meds forever. It was a house with a yard. But I remembered the insult. I remembered the cow eyes. I have conditions, I said, not touching the paper. Sato raised an eyebrow, a hint of a smile playing on her lips. Of course you do. Name them. 1, I said, holding up a finger. I leave at 3:30 p.m. every day to pick Maya up from school. I work from home in the evenings if I have to, but I am a father first. Done, she said instantly. 2, I continued. You apologize to the staff at Lapex, not just me, all of them. You treat people like furniture, and if I'm going to be your voice globally, I need to know you respect the people who have no voice. She hesitated, her jaw tightening. That pride was a hard thing to swallow. I will ... Send a formal letter and a bonus to the staff. In person, I pressed ... She sighed, a long defeated exhale. Fine, in person. And 3, I said, my voice softening. My wife ... She died because we couldn't navigate the system. Because we didn't have the words or the money to fight. I want you to start a scholarship foundation for kids of single parents who want to study languages or humanities, kids who slip through the cracks. Sato stared at me for a long time. She looked over at Maya, who was happily drawing a purple sun on a piece of paper. The icy exterior of the iron lotus seemed to melt just a little. The Elena Thorne Memorial Scholarship, she said quietly. We can set it up within the month. I felt the tears prick my eyes again, but this time it wasn't from fear. Then we have a deal. We shook hands, and her grip was firm, real. No gloves, no hesitation. It felt like I was touching an electric fence that had finally been turned off. I walked out of that office with a job that paid more in a year than I had made in the last decade. But the ride down in the elevator with Maya holding my hand, that was the moment the reality hit. I looked at my reflection in the polished brass doors. I wasn't the waiter anymore. I wasn't the widower drowning in grief. I was Julian Thorne, and I had just negotiated with a titan and won. The first day on the job was surreal. I walked into Sato Dynamics wearing a suit I bought at a thrift store, but I had it tailored so it looked sharp. The whispers followed me. Obviously, that's the waiter, they said. That's the guy who yelled at the boss. But I ignored them. I dove into the work. It wasn't easy. The expansion into Brazil was a mess. The legal team was mistranslating Portuguese contract law, confusing liability with obligation, $1 million mistake waiting to happen. I caught it on day 2. By day 3, I was sitting in meetings, correcting seasoned executives, and the funny thing was, Sato backed me up every single time. She'd sit at the head of the table, silent, watching, and when some VP would try to talk over me, she'd just tap her pen on the glass table, click, click, and say, let him finish. He's right. But the real test wasn't the work. It was the promise. 2 weeks in, Sato walked into my office. Get your coat, she said. We're going to lunch. We didn't go to a steakhouse. We went back to Lepex. My stomach did a somersault. Walking back in there, Seeing Gavin's face turn the color of cottage cheese when he saw me next to the billionaire ... It was priceless, but Sato didn't sit down to eat. She walked into the kitchen. The chefs stopped chopping, the dishwashers froze. She stood in the middle of the grease and the steam, in her $4,000 suit, and she bowed. A deep, respectful bow. "I apologize," she said, her voice clear. "I treated this establishment and its staff with disrespect. It was a failure of character. It won't happen again." Then she handed Gavin an envelope bonuses for everyone, heavy bonuses. Leo, the busboy who spilled the water, looked like he was going to pass out. I caught his eye and winked. We walked out, and as we got into the car, Sato let out a breath she seemed to have been holding for an hour. "That was ... horrifying," she admitted. "That was leadership," I said. "Don't push." "Your luck, Julian," she muttered, but she was smiling. 6 months flew by. The scholarship fund launched, and the first recipient was a kid from the South Side named Marcus who wanted to learn Mandarin. I read his application essay at the kitchen table while Maya did her homework, and I cried into my coffee. Elena would have loved this. She would have loved that her name was opening doors for kids like us. But life has a funny way of testing you just when you think you've stuck the landing. We were in Tokyo for the final negotiations of the merger. It was the biggest deal in the company's history. The Japanese conglomerate we were merging with was old school, very traditional, very conservative. The chairman, Mr. Yamashita, was a man of 80, strict, unsmiling. The dinner was tense. Sato was on edge. She needed this deal to secure the company's future for the next decade. We were at a ryokan, sitting on tatami mats,